Have you ever gone to one, Vivian?
No, I've never gone one. I know. Don't say a word. I'll go. I'm going up to this one, as a matter of fact, if I ever get time.
It's supposed to be fantastic.
I know. I'd like to go. I've always thought I would go, but...
Vivian Vance made millions laugh every week as Ethel Mertz on I Love Lucy, the most-watched television program in America during the 1950s. Behind that warm, bumbling, comedic performance lived a woman of tremendous talent, real emotional pain, and complicated private struggles that most fans never saw. She won the first Emmy Award ever given to a supporting actress. She survived abuse, nervous breakdown, and decades of being reduced to a character she never fully wanted to play. And when the cameras finally stopped rolling for good, what followed was far from a comfortable retirement. The Weight of Ethel Mertz. Before I Love Lucy changed everything, Vivian Vance had built a real theatrical career of her own. She had worked alongside Ethel Merman on Broadway, understudying the legendary performer in Anything Goes. She had appeared in big productions, earned serious notices, and commanded respect from the theatrical community in New York. Her name carried genuine weight on the stage. When Desi Arnaz and his team came to watch her perform in The Voice of the Turtle at the La Jolla Playhouse in 1951, they were watching a seasoned professional with nearly 2 decades of stage experience behind her. That context matters enormously when trying to understand what the role of Ethel Mertz eventually cost her. Vance did not want the part at first. She found the character frumpy, unglamorous, and limiting. She was also troubled by the idea of being cast as the wife of William Frawley, who was 22 years her senior. According to accounts from that era, she made an offhand comment on the first day of rehearsal about the age gap between her and Frawley, a remark he reportedly overheard and never forgave. That friction defined their on-set relationship for the entire run of the show. Their famous screen chemistry as Fred and Ethel Mertz was built on genuine professional tension rather than friendship. Frawley never warmed to her. She, in turn, found his manner disagreeable. Yet the writers, reportedly aware of how much the two disliked each other, wrote that friction into the scripts and made it work. Once I Love Lucy became the most watched program in America, Vance found herself permanently attached to a character she had never fully embraced. Ethel Mertz was beloved by audiences. Vivian Vance, as an individual, began to disappear behind that creation. She noticed it happening in real time. She later remarked with painful honesty that when she died, people would send flowers to Ethel Mertz rather than to Vivian Vance. That observation carried no humor. It expressed a genuine fear of erasure, of a full artistic identity being slowly consumed by a single role played beside a single, far more famous star. The professional structure of the show reinforced that imbalance constantly. Lucille Ball, as co-owner of Desilu Productions, alongside Desi Arnaz, held enormous creative power over the series. Vance was an employee and a highly effective one, but her creative input remained limited. A popular and persistent story claimed that her contract contained a clause requiring her to remain at least 10 pounds heavier than Ball. While no legally binding document of this kind was ever publicly confirmed, the story circulated for decades and reflected something psychologically real about the dynamics on set. That Vance was expected to remain a contrast to Ball rather than a fully realized performer in her own right. The rumor alone reveals how the industry framed her value. Despite all of this, Vance committed fully to the work. In 1954, she became the first actress ever to win a Primetime Emmy Award for Outstanding Supporting Actress, a historic achievement that reflected the depth she brought to a role that could easily have been played as simple comic relief. She was nominated for the same award 3 additional times before the series ended in 1957. The Emmy was real recognition, earned recognition. But even that landmark could not separate her entirely from the shadow of the role. She was celebrated not as Vivian Vance, but as the woman who played Ethel. The distinction sounds small. For someone with her theatrical background and ambitions, it was enormous. How many performers have watched their largest professional achievement slowly become their professional cage? After I Love Lucy ended its original run in 1957, Vance continued playing Ethel Mertz in a series of hour-long specials known as The Lucille Ball Desi Arnaz Show, later renamed The Lucy Desi Comedy Hour, a private life full of pain. Long before any camera captured Vivian Vance's face, her personal life was already moving through patterns of difficulty that would follow her for decades. She was married 4 times in total. Her first marriage, to Joseph Shearer Danick Jr., came and went in the late 1920s, lasting only a few years. Her second, to musician George Koch in 1933, also ended in divorce after roughly 7 years. Both marriages were childless, and Vance rarely discussed them publicly. She worked hard to keep her romantic history private, managing at times to obscure how many times she had actually been married before the fame of I Love Lucy made her personal details impossible to contain. Her third marriage, to actor Philip Ober in 1941, lasted 18 years and caused her profound damage. According to Lucille Ball and other contemporaries, Ober subjected Vance to physical and psychological abuse over the course of their marriage. His own acting career did not flourish the way hers did. When I Love Lucy turned Vance into one of the most recognizable faces on American television, Ober's resentment reportedly intensified. Ball, who witnessed the effects of this abuse firsthand, described Ober as someone who took out his jealousy on Vance in direct and ugly ways. Ball recalled Vance arriving to work with visible injuries. The situation became impossible to ignore. Ball is reported to have told Vance that if she did not leave Ober, their working relationship would become untenable. Vance finally divorced Ober in 1959, but the financial consequences of that divorce were steep. Because the bulk of her wealth had been accumulated during the success of I Love Lucy, community property laws required her to divide significant assets with Ober. She was forced to give up half of approximately $160,000 in community property, which included her ranch in Cubero, New Mexico, and her home in California. Leaving an abusive marriage came at a high material cost, a circumstance that has historically trapped countless people in unhealthy situations far longer than they should have stayed. The roots of these troubled relationships stretched back to Vance's early life. Pop culture historian Jeffrey Mark, who wrote extensively about Vivian Vance's biography, explained that her father's repressive nature left her afraid of men in ways she struggled to articulate. According to Mark, Vance herself spoke openly about this fear, acknowledging that it shaped who she chose as partners across multiple marriages. The patterns in those relationships, repeatedly choosing men who were unavailable in different ways, reflected something unresolved in her personal psychology that professional therapy eventually helped her to examine more clearly. Her fourth and final marriage brought genuine peace. On January 16, 1961, she married literary agent and publisher John Dodds. He was 12 years her junior, and there were persistent rumors about his sexuality, though neither Vance nor Dodds ever confirmed or denied them publicly. But the years ahead still held more hardship than she could have anticipated. Stay glued till the very end. Life after The Lucy Show. When Lucille Ball returned to television in 1962 with The Lucy Show, Vance agreed to join her under specific conditions. She negotiated to have her character named Vivian, not Ethel. and she insisted on being allowed to wear more glamorous clothing than the frumpy wardrobe the Ethel Mertz years had required. Those conditions were concessions from Ball, reflecting how much she needed Vance and how aware she was of Vance's complicated feelings about returning to a sidekick role. Vance's character on The Lucy Show was Vivian Bagley, a divorcee, and the series offered her somewhat more range than Ethel had provided. But the fundamental dynamic remained. She was the second name in the credits, the foil to the star, the woman laughing beside Lucille Ball rather than generating laughter entirely on her own. Vance appeared in 78 episodes of The Lucy Show over 3 seasons. By 1965, the strain of regular cross-country commuting between her life in Connecticut with John Dodds and the production schedule in Los Angeles had become unsustainable. She made clear that she wanted out of the series. Her official explanation centered on the commute and her desire to prioritize her marriage. Behind the scenes, she also sought a substantial salary increase and greater creative and directorial control as conditions for continuing, demands that eventually exceeded what Ball and the production were willing to meet. The negotiation ended her regular role on the series. The departure was emotionally difficult for Ball, who had depended on Vance not just professionally, but personally. Co-star Gail Gordon, who joined The Lucy Show after Vance left, recalled Ball telling him privately that she did not know how to do a show without Vivian. Those words reflected something real about the nature of their partnership. Ball understood, even if she did not always say so directly, that Vance was not simply a supporting player, but a genuine creative engine who made everything around her work better. Losing that was a professional blow as much as a personal one. Following her departure from The Lucy Show, Vance pursued the film career she had long hoped to restart. She appeared in Blake Edwards' big-budget comedy The Great Race in 1965, a film that received multiple Academy Award nominations and performed moderately at the box office. The role offered her a chance to demonstrate comedy skills in a different context from the domestic sitcom format she had inhabited for over a decade. But the film did not lead to a sustained film career. The movie industry in the mid-1960s was shifting rapidly, and Vance, now in her mid-50s and indelibly associated with television, did not find Hollywood opening its doors in the way she had hoped. She returned to Broadway in the late 1960s and early 1970s, working steadily in theatrical productions that kept her performing and in demand among theater audiences, even if they did not bring the mass recognition of her television years. Productions during this period included Barefoot in the Park, Butterflies Are Free, and Arsenic and Old Lace, among others. Her Broadway salary commanded approximately $2,500 per week, a reflection of her genuine standing as a theatrical performer. When she returned to Albuquerque, New Mexico, the community that had helped fund her original journey to New York decades earlier, she accepted a maximum of $250 per week out of a sense of loyalty and gratitude to the city that had launched her. In the 1970s, Vance discovered that commercial endorsements provided a lucrative and less physically demanding way to remain visible. She signed a 3-year contract worth $250,000 to serve as the face of Maxwell House Coffee, playing a character named Maxine in a long-running series of television advertisements. The Maxwell House commercials kept her in living rooms across America, though in a very different context from the one that had made her famous. She also made television guest appearances during this period, including a notable 1975 appearance on the sitcom Rhoda, and appeared in several made-for-television films. The work kept coming, even as her health began to deteriorate. And what came next would test her survival in a way nothing before it had. Stay glued till the very end. The final years. In 1973, Vivian Vance received a diagnosis of breast cancer. She underwent a mastectomy and a course of chemotherapy as part of her initial treatment. For a time, there was reason to believe she had beaten the disease. She continued working, continued making public appearances, and maintained the warm, resilient exterior that her decades in performance had trained her to project. But the cancer had not been fully contained. Over the years that followed, it metastasized into bone cancer, spreading through her body in ways that caused significant and increasing pain. A woman who had already navigated nervous breakdown, abusive marriage, professional marginalization, and the slow erosion of her own artistic identity now faced a physical battle that would occupy the last years of her life. In 1974, Vance and John Dodds relocated to Belvedere, California, a small and quiet community north of San Francisco Bay. The move was motivated in part by her desire to be near her sister, and in part by the couple's decision to leave behind the pace and pressure of their previous lives. They had lived in Stamford, Connecticut, then in Manhattan, then briefly operated a travel agency in Santa Fe, New Mexico, before the cancer diagnosis prompted a reassessment of how they wanted to spend whatever time remained. Belvedere offered peace, proximity to family, and a slower rhythm that suited Vance as her health gradually declined. Her final television appearance alongside Lucille Ball came in November 1977 on the CBS special Lucy Calls the President. The special aired on November 21st, 1977, and gave audiences one last look at the partnership that had defined both women's careers for the better part of 3 decades. For Vance, the appearance required considerable effort. Her health was declining, and the logistics of the production were not easy. But she showed up, as she always had, and the chemistry between her and Ball remained exactly what it had always been. That resilience in the face of physical deterioration said something essential about her character. Also in 1977, Vance suffered a stroke that left her partially paralyzed. The stroke compounded the suffering caused by the bone cancer and significantly reduced her mobility and independence. She spent her final years in Belvedere, cared for by Dodds and surrounded by family, as the disease progressed beyond treatment. Friends and family who visited during this period described a woman who faced the end with remarkable composure, though the physical pain was real and unrelenting. Her youngest sister, Lou Ann, later described the atmosphere in those final days as one of collective love and readiness, a family gathered and praying together, hoping Vivian could find peace. In August 1979, Lucille Ball traveled to Belvedere to see Vance for the last time. Paige Peterson, a close friend of Vance's who had become acquainted with her after renting her mother's home to the couple, witnessed the visit. Peterson described the scene with quiet precision. Vance was lying on the couch in the living room when Ball arrived. The two women ate lunch together, talked at length, and then both understood that this was a final goodbye. Peterson recalled being in a nearby room and hearing the two women alternating between laughter and sobbing. The love between them, accumulated over nearly 3 decades of work, friendship, conflict, and loyalty, was undeniable and visible to everyone in the house that day. Vivian Vance died on August 17, 1979 in Belvedere, California. She was 70 years old. The cause of death was metastatic breast cancer. She was cremated and her ashes scattered. She left behind no children. Desi Arnaz, upon hearing of her death, expressed the loss with characteristic directness, stating that it was bad enough to lose one of the great artists they had worked with, but harder still to reconcile the loss of one of their closest friends. Ball, according to her son Desi Arnaz Jr., was inconsolable for weeks. He described her as genuinely unable to process life after Vance's passing, spending days in grief that went beyond ordinary mourning. The two women had been, in the most real sense, essential to each other. The posthumous recognition came slowly, but eventually arrived. In 1991, Vivian Vance received a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, 12 years after her death. In 2012, she and William Frawley were both inducted into the Television Academy Hall of Fame together, an acknowledgement of the foundational contribution their partnership made to the history of the medium. Her Emmy Award, the one she won in 1954 as the first ever supporting actress to receive that honor, was donated to the Albuquerque Little Theater by her family after her death, returning a piece of her legacy to the community that had first believed in her enough to send her to New York. What gets left out of most accounts of Vivian Vance is the full texture of who she was before, during, and after the role that defined her publicly. She was a woman who escaped a repressive upbringing by sheer force of determination. She built a serious theatrical career across the most competitive stages in the country. She survived a mental breakdown and emerged from it still committed to her art. She survived an abusive marriage and eventually chose a partner who treated her with respect. She became the first woman to win an Emmy in her category at a time when that distinction carried genuine historical weight. She quietly helped reshape how mental health conversations could happen in celebrity culture, speaking openly about her own struggles at a time when that kind of honesty was rare and sometimes professionally dangerous. She was also, without question, one of the greatest comic performers in the history of American television. The partnership between Lucille Ball and Vivian Vance remains the most celebrated female comedy duo in the history of the medium. That achievement did not belong to Ball alone. It belonged to both of them equally, even if the credits and the cultural memory have not always reflected that truth. Vivian Vance deserves to be remembered not as Ethel Mertz and not as Lucy's sidekick, but as Vivian Roberta Jones from Cherryvale, Kansas. A woman of remarkable ability, uncommon courage, and a life far more complex and fully lived than the character she made immortal ever suggested. With this, we have come to the end of this video. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, do well to like, comment, and subscribe for more content. To enjoy more thrilling stories, click now on the following video that pops up on your screen.